What is up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of State of the Steelers. I'm your Steel Current Network host, Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about the unfortunate loss the Pittsburgh Steelers took to the New York Jets, getting blanked 17-0, a game that saw some quarterback struggle, maybe perhaps a little bit of back to reality. But you know what? Maybe not. I thought that the quarterbacks actually played okay. The box score is going to say one thing, but watching the game and watching it over again, maybe perhaps there was a little bit more to it. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Without further ado, let's get into it. So Drew Allar and Will Howard didn't finish the night very well. They went through some adversity through this night against the New York Jets. And let's look at the stats, so to speak. So you have Drew Allar went 11 of 23 for 110 yards, 4.8 average, and he was sacked 3 times for 29 yards. And when you look at Will Howard, he was 10 of 15 for 74 yards, 4.9 yard average, 2 interceptions, and he was also sacked for 11 yards. Now, if you were to look at the box score, you'd say that was a horrible night. These guys played bad, poorly, and I'm not going to say I disagree with that, but I don't agree with it. I would say that there's more to it. When it comes to Will Howard, he had 2 interceptions that looked really, really bad. However, going back, and if you look at this, and I'll be breaking this down on my State of the Steelers YouTube channel, probably tomorrow, if not tomorrow, maybe the next day. We're going to look at the all-22, and I'm going to show you guys what appears to be, Roman Wilson kind of drifting on his route and allowing, the cornerbacks and the defensive backs to undercut on both of those plays for the turnover. Now, I also think that Will Howard needs to put a little bit more mustard on the ball and get it there. I think that it's twofold, right? It's the receiver not responding correctly and the quarterback not having the arm strength. And when you have those two kind of combination, it's going to result in some bad issues or bad plays, especially when you're going up against the top defenses for the opposing team. And that's what we saw. And, Roman Wilson, he drifted on both of those plays. And I think this is a reason why maybe perhaps we didn't see a lot of Roman Wilson for the last few years. He wasn't that polished coming out of Michigan. He had, the offense there was more geared towards running the ball, et cetera. And he flashed and he had some good plays and things of that nature. But because it wasn't like an, pro offense type of pro offense in that program, I think he's suffering from a few of those bad habits, so to speak, that he needs to get over with. But you would expect at this point that he would have. I mean, he spent how long? I think it was 2 off seasons now with the route god. You would assume that at this point, drifting from his routes would be a thing of the past, but it's not. He continues to do it. And like I said, this is probably why he hasn't seen a lot of playing time and why we may actually see a guy like Jeremy Bernard take over in that wide receiver 3. And I'm not against it at this point. We haven't seen Roman Wilson actually do anything spectacular. And I know a lot of people have said, well, maybe perhaps it was his relationship or the lack there of trust with Aaron Rodgers or whatever the case may be, whatever excuse you want to put to it. Now we've seen 2 preseason games, and, Roman Wilson had 2 catches for 16 yards, but he was targeted 5 times. 2 of them ended up in the hands of the defense. Another one ended up on the ground. Is this the end? Maybe that should be the title of the show. Is this the end of some careers here? And is this going to be the end of Roman Wilson being wide receiver 3? Is he going to end up being somewhere further down in the depth chart? I think he's in danger of that. Now, do I think that the Steelers are going to cut him? No, I don't think that. I think he's going to still make this team. He still has, value to this team as a rotational player. But I don't see how the Pittsburgh Steelers can maintain him on the team at this point. Well, I don't see how the Steelers can maintain him as wide receiver 3. And I don't think a guy like Aaron Rodgers is going to want Roman Wilson. And, if he's continuing to make these type of mistakes, and I think that, that's probably why we haven't seen him in some time or at all, and probably why we won't see much of him, this year. So, Will Howard, did he have the greatest game? No, not at all. But I thought he played better than probably what the box score says. If he could get the ball out there a little bit with some more mustard on it, then maybe perhaps Rowan Wilson isn't drifting away, because he's waiting for the ball to get there. And so, excuse for both guys. It was a bad play on both guys. And for Will Howard, I mean, it's detrimental to what he's trying to do right now. This was his bigger opportunity. This was his chance to play up against, some of the ones, majority of the ones, not all of the ones were going to be out there. I don't think Mika Fitzpatrick played for the Jets and a couple of other players on the defense. And so their defense wasn't that full, starter 100% everything. And obviously it's a preseason game, so they're going to be kind of showing you their hand, so to speak. There's not going to be a lot of disguises and things like that. But for the most part, you're going up against the top tier talent in the NFL. And this was his opportunity, and it just didn't go well for him. And, Mike McCarthy had said after the game in his press conference that sometimes the film will, show you where you thought you played well and you may not have played as well as you thought. And when you think you've played pretty poorly, it may not be as bad as it initially seemed. And for this case, with Will Howard, I think that's probably what it is. Now, did he do enough? I know you can look at other players and say, oh, that's their fault that the interceptions happen. Me personally, I think that next week I would like to see Drew Allar start the game and then Will Howard take over in the second half. Do I think that Will Howard did enough to be quarterback 2 tonight? No. I think that's more so than ever probably Mason's job, just because even though some of those plays, those interceptions may not have been 100% on Will Howard, he still had some culpability there. And Mason Rudolph is, you know what you are. You know what you have in him. He's a backup quarterback, and that's what you want to have on this team as a backup quarterback. Somebody that can go in there that's had some experience and somebody that you can trust is going to, give you an opportunity to win. If that person was definitely going to give you, that high of a chance of winning, your backup quarterback, then they wouldn't be a backup quarterback. They'd be a starter somewhere. And so all you can hope for when you have a backup quarterback is that person's going to give you a 50-50 chance of winning the game. And when you look at Mason Rudolph's record, he's a 50-50 guy or a 500 guy. So he's going to give you that 50-50 chance of winning. He's not going to kill you, and he's going to put you in a position where you could win. And that's all you can ask for in a backup quarterback. Backup quarterbacks aren't quarterbacks that are going to, go out there and be the difference maker and be the reason why you win. They're just going to be the reason why you didn't lose. And I think you got a good one in Mason for at least this year. And, I think that with this performance here, I think the Steelers can feel somewhat comfortable that if need be, especially if they don't play, Will Howard next week and, with the first group, right? And let's just say they switch it around and put Drew Allar there. And, even if Will Howard does well, he would not have put up good tape, so to speak, against quality defenses at that point. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that I think there's an opportunity that he could sneak onto the practice squad. And I think that might be your best bet. Get him on the practice squad. And if Drew Allar gives you enough, shows you enough that he could be a guy that you could develop into your franchise quarterback, and that Will Howard can be a guy that can be your long-term backup, there's nothing wrong with that. He could be the next, Mason Rudolph, so to speak. But when it comes to Drew, let's talk a little bit about Drew real quick. I thought he played well. I think that the players around him really failed him. I thought that the receivers that he was throwing to had a lot of drops. I thought the offensive line was super bad. Broderick Jones looked like a turntable. Last week against the Green Bay Packers, I thought Broderick Jones, turned a corner, but no. And you know what? I want to talk a little bit more about this offensive line. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll do that on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a few words from our sponsors. Hey, everybody. Thank you for sticking with us. Before we get back into the conversation, I want to remind you guys of our website, SteelCurtainNetwork.com, your one-stop shop for Pittsburgh Steelers news and coverage. Go check it out. While you're there, you can check out the don't forget, actually, about our app, Steel Curtain Network app. You can get the podcast, the audio only podcast. You can get the all the breaking news and articles, everything, Steeler centric on the app. So go check it out, Still Current Network. So, before I get more further into Drew Allar, I wanted to let's talk about the offensive line. The offensive line played poorly again. Even for Will Howard, he was under duress. He got sacked once, but like I mentioned, he was under duress much of the night. And it was a better performance compared to what Allar had. Allar was under duress the entire night. A lot of pressure. Like I mentioned before, Broderick Jones looked like a turntable in several plays. It looked like he was going up against some of the elite in the third and fourth quarter of that game. And you can't have that, with Broderick. I know he's coming off of a neck injury and he's getting back up into game shape and things of that nature. But, he's not even solidified a side he's going to play on. And so it just, I think the writing is on the wall there for Brod. He's, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be a swing tackle because he's not very good. When he's having a transition to both sides. I thought he played well last week on the left side. This week when he was on the right side, he just looked really, really bad. So I'm not too certain if he's a guy that when the 53 is going to be interesting, when you start going into your cuts, especially if you're really truly considering keeping 4 quarterbacks, which I doubt you're doing that now. But if you really are, you got to cut somewhere else. I don't think the offensive line is there, but a guy like Broderick Jones right now, I don't think you can get anything back for him. The neck injury was pretty significant. So if somebody, if the Steelers try to put him out there on the trade block, I don't think they'll get much back for him, especially after this performance. And so I don't think they did any favors for Drew Allar. The offensive line was poor. There was not much of a running game because of it. We saw a lot of Caleb Johnson out there. He had 10 carries, 3.9 yards. There were some times where he looked like he had some burst. There were some other times where it felt like he should have just ran over a couple of guys and he couldn't. And so it was a little bit up and down for me, but Drew Allar didn't have the running game. He didn't have the offensive line. He had a lot of receivers around him dropping the ball. It was wild, so I would like to see Drew with the first team, with an offensive line that's going to give him a little bit of time and also some receivers and some pass catchers that are going to catch the dang ball. I was frustrated with it. I thought Drew had probably one of the better throws, if not the best throw of the night, where he was getting pressured from the right side, moved through the pocket, and then just launched the ball about 40 yards down the field to the tight end who does a toe tap. Now, that tight end had a drop before that pass, drop after that pass. And so I'm like, with that guy, what was his name? Like Leach or something of that nature. Maybe it wasn't. What was his name? I know it wasn't Leach. It was, I got the first letter right. It was Lake McRae. I don't know where I got Leach from. Well, anyways, he had a few drops throughout he had another drop. So it was here he had 2 receptions on 3 targets. So maybe he only had 1 drop, and I'm thinking of somebody else that had a drop as well. But yeah, overall, the performance, a lot of balls hit the ground, and I would like to see Drew Allar with the first team. See what he got, and Will Howard working with the backup guys. I think that's gonna, maybe get a path for him to get on the practice squad. But kind of transitioning off the quarterbacks, running backs, I thought Rico Dowdell did all right. He had 5 carries, 18 yards, were 3.6 rushing average. I thought he did okay. He looked like he had some burst and he could get up the field. But again, the offensive line wasn't really blocking for him very well. Same thing for Jalen Warren. It didn't look like he had much room as well for him to make some noise. Eli Heinreich only had 2 carries. Yeah, he did have 9 yards, so for a 4.5 average. But I'd like to see a little bit more of Eli. I thought he played okay last week. I like to see more of him in the passing game. See what he can do. But overall, the running backs, they 26 carries for 98 yards, 3.8 average, 7-yard long by Eli Heinreich. another just subpar performance. Again, the pass catchers, a lot of drops. Didn't see Pittman obviously in DK Metcalf, so a big portion of the receiving core is going to be missing. Caden Wheatgen, though, man, you can't make that mistake. On the punt return, he ends up coughing it up, and so fortunately the defense pulled through and got the ball back, but can't be making those type of mistakes and giving up the rock that way. I think we saw a much different game from Caden Wheatgen this week. A little bit back to reality, so to speak. Didn't really have any impact in the receiving game, and just I'll be honest with you, I thought Herman did a better job as a kickoff returner. I think Wheatgen had one punt return that kind of sparked a little bit of some, but not really, But let's talk a little bit about the defense. Landon Roberts, I liked 50. Thumper back in the middle of everything, hitting people, preventing first downs. I like what I saw out of Landon Roberts. I like also what I saw out of Bruner. I thought he played well. I thought those two guys had a really excellent game. For the most part, they held the Jets in check. It was 7-0 for the longest time, and then in the fourth quarter, the Jets kind of just, led away with it. But I thought Landon Roberts, I thought Bruner did well. I thought Patrick Queen had a huge breakup or a huge tackle for loss in the backfield. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, he's been a guy that he struggled with tackles. Last year, I think he led and missed tackles. And so good to see him able to get somebody on the ground. The edges, they got close to Geno Smith a couple of times. I thought they applied pressure, to the backup quarterbacks a couple of different times. Overall, I thought that the defense did okay. They did well. I mean, until you got to the end of the game, which like what you're looking for at the end of the game is just evaluation, right? That's why you end up going out there and putting Drew Allar through a 2-minute drill at the end of the game, even though it was 17-0. You want to see if he can get down the field and put up some points. You want to it's about situational football in a game that you have a defense that's trying to hit you. So it's not just out there like on the practice field, etc. And so I understood what they were doing. I just wish it would have resulted in some points. And man, that last drive by Drew Allar, I thought he did well. Put the ball in the hands of receivers, and they just could not come down with the catch. It was so frustrating. I couldn't believe it. But and then you had a missed field goal. Let's get into the special teams. You had a missed field goal. Yeah, obviously Boswell's not going to miss that. As far as punting goes, I thought that Cam Johnson did fairly well. He pinned the Jets a couple of times, inside their own 20, and so I thought he did well. I thought the special teams guys did well. All except for Caden Wheatgen. Him fumbling that ball really kind of screwed the pooch. You know what I mean? But overall, I thought the defense played fine. Special teams played okay. They missed the field goal. Well, I guess they played bad. I'd give them an F. So let's just kind of go down to some scores here. For the quarterbacks, I would say, probably a C plus, C minus. Yeah, about a C plus, I would say. When it comes to the running backs, I would say a C minus. When it comes to the receivers, I'd go with a D. The offensive line, I'm going with a D plus. Defensively, let's see. Let's start off with the Geno Smith and the Jets were able to march down the field on the opening drive and score a touchdown on the majority of the starters on defense. So defensively, overall, I'd have to give them probably a C plus, B minus, somewhere around there. I know they held them down for the most part, but the Jets only played their starters offensively for the first series. Geno Smith only played one series, went down the field, scored a touchdown. That was the end of it. Now, they got close to him, but close doesn't count, right? They got close to Geno a few times where I thought they were going to knock the ball out of his hand, but they just weren't able to do it. And so defensively, for the pass rushers, I would say, well, let's see. How many sacks did the Steelers end up getting? They ended up sacking Cade Klubnik twice for 13 yards. Yeah, so there was some pressures there. So for I'll give them maybe a B minus for the pass rushers. The against the rush, I thought that the Steelers did fairly well against the rush this game. You know, they held the New York Jets to 24 carries for 62 yards, 2.6 average, and that includes Cade Klubnik's 16-yard rush as well that he had. So you take that out of the equation, and then you know the rushing game did their part. As far as the passing game, I mentioned that first drive, Adon Mitchell, he had some pretty good plays, but I think that overall the defense did well. I mean, they allowed the touchdown, and so they allowed 2 touchdowns actually through the air. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a C, just because of that. And there was a fumble, Deshaun Elliott. I thought that was, I thought him coming back, he had a little bit of rust, but I thought he started to settle down. I'm excited to see him back in the black and gold and seeing how he continues his career with the Steelers, because I thought he was on a really good trajectory before the injury. I just hope he can recuperate that and continue where he was. And if he does, then I think he'll be an excellent safety. I felt like there was a lot of good players. Number 31, I thought he had an excellent game right off the bat. A lot of tackles for loss and things of that. Rayshon Jenkins, awesome game. I thought that the defensive backs actually, I'd actually give him a B plus because of that. And so overall, I think the defense played better than the offense. I think the offense had their opportunities. I think they squandered them, and they got into the in scoring position. And I think the Steelers, could have won this game, but they didn't. And I think it's going to be a learning experience. I hope to see more Drew Allar in the next game, perhaps for the first quarter. I think that would be great to see. Him with an offensive line that can block for him and some pass catchers that can catch the ball. And we'll see what he looks like. But I think overall, I think that it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, and Drew Allar as your quarterbacks. And I think the Steelers are going to try to slide Will Howard into the practice squad, because, as I mentioned, with this performance today, not a lot of teams are going to be willing to give up a roster spot for a quarterback that didn't play his entire rookie season, was a 6th-round pick, and when played against formidable opponents, threw 2 interceptions and had a